It's been brought to my attention that there's some confusion regarding the creation accounts of Norse paganism and the Bible essentially being the same. While I do expect that most people are able to do this kind of research on their own, I'm nothing if not here to help clarify these matters. The creation accounts of any religion involving people, which is all of them, usually include the detail that at one point there weren't people, and then there were. The matter of how, why, and for what reason are irrelevant. If that's your standard, I'd say they're too loose. It's true that both Norse pagan traditions and the Bible both claim that mankind does indeed exist and hasn't always existed. But from there, we need to understand there are some differences. In the Norse pagan tradition, this is the Prose Edis book Gylfaginning, section 9, we're told the following. Then said Gangleri, much indeed they had accomplished then, methinks, when earth and heaven were made, and the sun and the constellations of heaven were fixed, and division was made of days. Now whence came the men that people the world? And Har answered, when the sons of Bor were walking along the sea strand, who? They found 2 trees, what? And took up the trees, and shaped men of them. Now, whereas that term men been used before, it's not reference to the Azir. It's first used in section 5 of the same source, Ymir and the giants. So, in what image, what shape? The first, here's the image part, gave them spirit and life. The second, wit and feeling. The third form, speech, hearing, and sight. And they gave them clothing and names. The male was called Oskar, the female Embla. And of them was mankind begotten, which received a dwelling place under Midgard. Next they made for themselves in the middle of the world a city which is called Asgard. Men call it Troy. So that is the Norse tradition regarding creation. The biblical creation of man is as follows. In Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 28, it says, Then God said, Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. What does that mean? Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, over cattle of all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So what? What image do they reflect? The dominion of God. So God created man in his own image. Who? In the image of God he created him, male and female, he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So, noting purpose as well. And if there's curiosity regarding what material God used to make man, we're told in the next chapter when the focus is brought to man after the creation account is observed, overviewing the way Jewish history is usually written. That is, in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 7, it notes that God shaped man from the dust of the earth. And then later in the chapter, it notes that God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, took one of his ribs, and shaped woman from it. So, noting their original names as Ish and Isha, man and woman, Adam was given the name from dirt, Adam, and Eve was given her name after the fall of man in Genesis chapter 3, noting she was the mother of all living. But to review, let's once again ask, what are we told? In the Edis, the first humans, Oskar and Embla, were shaped by the sons of Bor from trees for reasons we aren't told. They were shaped like Ymir, and the giants have already been described in section 5 of Gylfaginning, and given gifts that also came from those before them. Spirit, life, wit, feeling, form, speech, hearing, sight, and clothes, which is nice. In the Bible, the first humans, Adam and Eve, were shaped by God for the purpose of exercising dominion over creation. Man was created uniquely by God and with the express purpose of being a man. Woman was shaped from man's rib with the express purpose of being a woman. They were made in the image of God, which isn't a physical description, since God isn't a physical being, see John 4:24, but were representatives of him, reflecting his characteristics, authority, morality, and desire for relationships. This is what's traditionally called the imago Dei, or the image of God. A different kind and number of creators, a different material they were made from, a different purpose for which they were created, and a different image they reflected. Very different. Along with this, it's worth mentioning that the creation account is one that Norse pagans generally try to distance themselves from. Not because of the reasons some Christians claim this wasn't a literal event in regard to controversy regarding secular theories like abiogenesis macroevolution, but because of the mentioning of Troy from Homer's poems. Being the human name of Asgard usually ends up playing into the hands of those who would say this entire theology is a fabrication of culture, as claimed by Snorri Sturluson. In the prologue of Gylfaginning, section 3, we read this: "Near the earth's center was made that goodliest of homes and haunts that have ever been, which is called Troy," which we call Turkland. "This abode was much more gloriously made than others, and fashioned with more skill of craftsmanship in manifold wise, both in luxury and in wealth, which was there in abundance. There were 12 kingdoms and one high king, and many sovereignties belonged to each kingdom. In the stronghold there were 12 chieftains, the chieftains in every manly part, greatly above other men that have ever been in the world. One king among them was called Munon, or Menon, and he was wedded to the daughter of the high king Priam." This is directly referencing Homer's poems. "Her who was was called Throan, they had a child named Thror, whom we call Thor. He was fostered in Thrace by a certain war duke called Lorcus. But when he was 10 winters old, he took unto him the weapons of his father. He was goodly to look upon. When he came up among other men, as the ivory is inlaid in oak, his hair was fairer than gold. When he was 12 winters old, he had his full measure of strength. Then he lifted clear of the earth 10 bearskins all at one time. He then slew Duke Lorcus, his foster father, and with him his wife Laura, or Glora, and took in his own hands the realm of Thrace, which we call Thrudheim. Then he went forth far and wide over the lands and sought out every quarter of the earth, overcoming alone all berserks, bearskins, and giants, and one dragon, greatest of all dragons, and many beasts in the north half of his kingdom. He found the prophetess that is called Sibyl, whom we call Sif, and wedded her. The lineage of Sif I cannot tell. She was the fairest of all women, and her hair was like gold. Their son was Loridi, who resembled his father. His son was Eredni, and his son Vignor, Vigner, Moda, Magi, Siskef, Bedvig, Athra, whom we call Anar, Iterman, Heremold, Saglun. You get the idea. But the lineage ultimately leads to a son whose name was Odin, who was far famed for his wisdom in every accomplishment, and his wife was Frigida, which we call Frigg. Now, all that being said, now there's no evidence and plenty of fraud used to prop up, just like the particular theory of macroevolution used to dismiss the Bible's Genesis account. I'm well aware that Norse pagans do not take the prologue of the Prose Eddas seriously. It was written by a Christian who didn't believe the traditions he was compiling and made his own explanation in regard to the actual origins of these heathen gods being just men. I don't believe the gods are real, but I also don't buy this explanation for the same reason. There's no evidence to test it. So, when a comparison is made between two religions, make sure that you actually read the religious text before committing the fallacy known as parallelomania. Jumping back and forth from the broad interpretation of one series of texts, then narrowly defining another in order to establish a common origin is very bad thinking. If you believe your traditions, understand why. The same respect will be given and expected regarding my own beliefs. But don't play into the internet conspiracy theorist and play on terms that require us to be ignorant of both positions in order to take your claims seriously. No Wellhausen and Tübingen. If you understand that reference, extra credit to you. Thank you all for your time. I'll look forward to talking to you again more in the future. And note that the goal is clarity for both positions in this video. If you have questions or would like more information, perhaps citation for these discussions and topics, I'll be happy to discuss them more with you. Just make sure the questions and comments are sincere, sound, and sane. I look forward to talking to you all again next time. Till then, God bless you. And once again, have to recommend for clarity's sake, Jesus Christ, especially if these are the sources we have to wrestle with.